Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Kraven the Hunter. And this is the latest in the Sony, not Spider-Man, but Spider-Man Villains universe. And this film is from director J.C. Chander, who previously worked on films like Margin Cell and Triple Frontier. And this film is based off of the character of Kraven, who is one of the big intimidating huntsman characters of the Marvel comics, and he's this big game hunter in the comics. Here he loves animals and got his powers from lion's blood going in his blood, and then a magic potion from a mystic from Africa, and you're just like, okay, this is ridiculous. And I think that's the biggest challenge that Chander has with this film, because this is a very muted, very stark-looking film. And it's a lot of ways trying to be like this gritty, heavy, violent, bloody, R-rated thriller. Except there's so many elements of it that are just so ridiculous and silly. This, the action in this is brutal. It is violent, and it delivers. There's just not a ton of action, to be perfectly honest, in this 2-hour and 7-minute movie. Especially with Kraven getting in the action. Really wish there was more of him doing that, but he does some really incredible athletic things and stuff like that with his powers. You have the action that is brutal and bloody. You have this whole feel of this is a crime thriller. This is like a mafia movie. With these different moving pieces. But it also has a man who has magic powers from an African mystic, and you're just like, that doesn't sound a little ridiculous. You also have, Dimitri, who is Kraven's brother, who eventually, comes into being Chameleon. And you have Rhino, who, thanks to, this mad scientist in New York City, turns into a giant rhino person with, thick rhino armor skin and has a literal horn in his head. And it's just, the Foreigner too is just a strange mutant character as well, who's an assassin. And this film goes into these really crazy, ridiculous, over-the-top elements while trying to balance all these authentic and gritty kinds of elements. And it doesn't always work. The writing for this, the dialogue in this movie is horrible. Almost not a single line is interesting in the whole entire film. And that's not an exaggeration. There's a couple of great lines from Calypso Ariana DeBose's character, because this is rated R and she could get away with what she says. Those are the best 2 lines in the whole film. Storyline-wise, this is convoluted. It has too many twists and turns that just don't feel earned. The logic of it just goes out the window right off the bat. There's this flashback to when they were younger, when Kraven gets his powers, and that whole sequence with the younger versions of them. It's just not that interesting. But there is something interesting and thematic about this film in terms of legacy and violence and that history of violence, which is interesting because Chander directed A Most Violent Year. And you feel some of those themes resonate in this film, and it does a solid job of exploring some of those ideas. The costuming is great, Kraven's outfits, Calypso's outfits, and Russell Crowe just bouncing between big suit tuxed up mafioso and then big game hunter chic. And I think the costuming is great. I really like the score too. Barry Wallfish does a really good job, along with Evgeny Galperine and Sasha Galperine, who add some interesting layers to the music as well. I think this has some interesting characters. I think Kraven, even though he's not very comic book accurate, I think his whole vibe, his idea is interesting. The dynamic with his brother and abandoning his brother and how that resentment grows. Russell Crowe's character is just tough guy. Alexei, who is the Rhino, is such a strange and weird character, and so is the Foreigner. And a lot of this is the performances. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson is a really strong leading man here. I think he really sells the physicality. I buy into him. Fred Hatchinger, who is just in Gladiator 2, didn't have the highest hopes for, but like he winds up really coming to his own in this film. I could watch Russell Crowe over and over and over again with his big, thick Russian accent. He's fantastic. The dialogue's so bad in this film that I almost question like how great of an actor Ariana DeBose is, because like some of her line delivery is like really bad. But when she does get some inspired bits of dialogue, she sells it. And she sells the physicality too. Christopher Abbott's such a strange presence as the Foreigner, and that really works. But Alessandro Nivola is having the most fun out of anybody as Alexei Sitsevich, aka the Rhino. He's just having a ball. And he is hamming it up to hear, and it's fantastic. I really enjoyed the opening sequence of this film, and it really sets a good stage. I think it moves perfectly fine, and I really felt bored. And when they do get into the action, these chases and these fights and stuff like that, they do some cool and interesting things. I just feel like this movie, like the dialogue is terrible, the story is dumb, some of the themes work, and some of it just, every time this film feels like it's trying to say something, it just slaps you across the face with it in the most blunt, unnuanced way possible. There's things that really work about this, and there's other things that just really do it serious damage. But at the end of the day, I think this is a very middle of the road, but entertaining watch. And I would rather put this on than any of the other Sony villain films at this point, whether it's the 3 Venom, Madam Web, or Morbius. But this film, I think it's going to fly under the radar. I don't think too many people are super excited about it, but it has its moments and it has its merit. But those are my thoughts on Kraven. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.